internet. It is Dave. It is Duncan.
It's me.
Back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from UK industrial trio Tayne. The band's new album, Love, will be released on January 31st via MNRK Heavy.
MNRK.
An exploration of love, desire, conflict, and fear. Love is the new album from London-based industrial noise pop Tayne. Written during a period of disassociation, Tayne mastermind Matt Sutton documents his ideas of love as conflict, sacrifice, and compromise, how emotional attachment leads to clashes, and how the repercussions can ripple down through generations. What does love cost? How far are we willing to go to chase it? There's definitely a defeated attitude in most of the song, Matt says. I was intimidated by intimacy, afraid of being vulnerable, and putting myself out there. Soundtracked by a raging hybrid of metal, industrial, shoegaze, and pop, Love wrestles with the classic definition of the word, exploring how we navigate the clashes that emerge through its pursuit. Whilst the lyrical themes of love predominantly stem from Matt's own experiences, there was also a subconscious through line that resonated closer to home. A child of divorce, Matt's parents separated, which it was later revealed was due to his dad being a gay man. He told me that I could contextualise it, Matt says of the separation today, and instantly there were no harsh feelings. I think realising that at a young age opened my mind to being an accepting person, understanding life isn't black and white. What had originally been conceived as an album about Matt's own trials in the pursuit of love started to envelope his father's experiences too. All of the lyrics echoed similarities of a relationship that led to his birth. Very quickly, the visual side of the record started to come through into a story that we could tell that is, in a way, his story, offers Matt. Love also features Rollo Tomasi's James Spence on the track Fear, and Cage Fight's Rachel Asp on Coherent, who both join a long list of Tayne collaborators. The album was co-produced by the band and longtime collaborator Wayne Adams, who has also worked with Greenlung and Pet Brick. Okay, so I've got like a hair or something floating about here. It's really annoying. Two things caught my eye about this. Firstly, MNRK Heavy.
Yep.
When I looked at it, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Not a band that I would paired with or expected to see on that roster. And I couldn't think of another band on the label or the roster that sounded like Tayne, but maybe that's the point, I don't know. Secondly, as soon as I saw the list of influences and for fans of, I could already tell how erect Duncan was going to be. So, the question is, Duncan, how erect were you during this album?
Well, I'm glad you asked, and hopefully we'll be able to put up the old emoji sensor. I'll show you, Dave.
Okay.
6 o'clock shadow. Not a band that's been on my radar, to be honest with me. And it seems like from there they've got quite a lot of history, so maybe something I want to go further and check out. You're right, not knowing what record label they're on, because once again, don't read the PR. MNRK does feel like a weird one, but at the same time, maybe not so much, actually, because I feel like with most industrial bands, you probably find the bands themselves are heavily involved with the recording process and all the rest, which probably takes the cost in a little bit from all that sort of stuff. And, an industrial metal band will be able to play on innumerable shows with lots of different bands, because you don't really need to, it'll cater for a lot, right? You can slot them in relatively easy. My first impression when you sent it over was, I have no idea from the artwork what this is going to be like at all. And then put on the first track, Erased, which is essentially, it is like an intro song, but builds into a song. So it's like a kind of, it does the thing that I hate, but they do it in a way which makes me like it. we start to build up a lot of stuff, textures, tones, or like a fucking drum beat starts coming in like a galloping horse, and I could tell straight away there was an electronic element. And we mentioned this before. If I don't know what the genre is and a band does that in the first track, unless it comes back in another track somewhere throughout the album, fuck this album. I hate bands that put stuff in their intros that they don't touch on again because it's the first thing people hear. It'd be like going to see, I don't know, it'd be like, I'm going to go and see a Western, and at the beginning there's a gunfight with bandits on a horse, and then the rest of the movie is set on a farm corralling cattle, and you never get that again. But that was the first 5 minutes. I expect all the way through it. No. So that's kind of my approach to this. So first thing I will say about Tayne is tons of influences, right? You can hear them all the way through. The big one, and this will not surprise you at all, and having purveyed them most recently live, Health is obviously the biggest influence on this band. It's all the way right through their sound.
Yep.
And Health have such a unique sound as well within the industrial genre, not musically but vocally specifically, where I think that's what makes them stand out. Like, there's a lot of bands that try and sound like Nine Inch Nails, or a lot of bands that try and sound like Skinny Puppy or, you know, Ministry or that. You can hear those influences, and usually it comes through this is a band that sounds like Ministry because the vocals sound like Big Al and the music sounds like that. But Health are a band where vocally there's a distinction between sometimes the harshness of the music in the background and this kind of clean, almost sobering, kind of floaty, ethereal vocals, which are all over Tayne. That's the predominant vocal styling. That is not to say that you don't get a bit of the gruff and the rough. That's in here as well. And when it comes in, I actually found they don't overuse it. They maybe underuse it just a little bit, but they don't overuse it. And those bits have prominence and impact generally down with the kind of more machine gun-like, chuggy, industrial guitar kind of tone that they bring in now and again. So I like quite a lot of this. I do have some negatives, and I will back up my negatives with my opinion and evidence, which is what I do. I'm not one of these people that are like, it's all right, and then they don't say anything else about it. You're gonna get some stuff from me here. Stuff I really liked about this one. Nice short album. So I think if you're gonna do this sort of thing, you can fall into the danger of doing songs that have big long intros, big long outros, because it's all in synths, so you can do that. They never actually fall into that trap, and in fact, I think no song on this goes over the 5 minute mark, which is perfect, and of which there are only 10 tracks as well. So at an album that clocks in under 34 minutes, the flow is really, really, really good from that side of things. 2, I think the production is absolutely brilliant. I love what they're doing in terms of loops, samples, and keys. Super, super, super cool. Varied sounds, but once again, it doesn't sound like we're just playing any sound that the machine has, and then all of a sudden there's a weird kind of 80s sound, and then 2 seconds later there's like a Hans Zimmer sort of fucking aeroplane coming down from the... You know, they're keeping them contextualized in a fairly succinct bubble of sounds, but at the same time you're still getting quite a lot in there. I would say the overall mix in it is fucking great as well. So those guitars are never really not in the mix, but when they do come in with that industrial chug, they're loud and distorted, but not like fucking super loud and in your face. It's all contained very, very, very well. Vocally, love the vocals. So love that kind of floaty 80s sort of sound that the lead vocalist has. I love the gruff vocals. I'm assuming someone else does that. If it is him that does that, that's cool as well. I think I like both tones on there. Like I say, I would maybe have had a little bit more of the gruff in some parts, but it doesn't need it. It's just more for my taste. So I like that as well. I think the guest appearances, brilliant. And I think they're also spaced brilliantly on here. Which is a common trapping on the first half of the album. But they're not used in a way where I feel like those songs couldn't be played live without those people, which I always get like worried about when you get people in that sound demonstrably different to what it is you do, or play something demonstrably different to how you play. How does that translate live? I could see that completely working live in both cases. So really like that aspect as well. I also think as well, in terms of uptake, I think the UK is crying out for a band that sound like this right now. So once again, lean back at the MNRK thing. Health are a band who are kind of out with the big bands in the industrial scene now, of which Nine Inch Nails have just announced a tour. They're about to come back with a new album, even though no one thought they were going to do that again. It's going to be huge again, and everyone's going to be back in the industrial. But Health, to me, released one of the most important albums in the genre for quite some time. And they're a band that have steadily got bigger and bigger and bigger because people clamber for that sound when it's done well. I think Tayne are in a right spot in the UK anyway, where, like I mentioned before, I could see these guys playing with bands like Zetra. I could see these guys playing with bands like Employed to Serve. I could see them playing with Rolo Tomasi. I could see them slot really, really well in. So I think their sound is going to work, and I actually think this album is going to go really, really well for them. On the flip side, couple of negatives. First big negative is I did feel certain sections fell into the trap of a very samey sound in some of the verses where I kind of was like, oh, right, is that still the same song I was listening? If I wasn't paying attention, I thought I'd heard elements before from previous songs. The reason behind that is that it's usually in the verse, it's never in the chorus. It's because the verse is building up, and that's what industrial music does. Industrial music is... We've talked about this before. It's layering. You bring something in an idea, then you continually build on top of that. So when the next time the verse comes in, it's a fuller version, usually shorter, and the chorus is longer. A couple of occasions where I just felt it was the same trick that was being used, maybe more than once in a few tracks, and it doesn't turn me off from it, but at the same time, some of the other elements I heard in here, I was like, you could have just done that, or you could have made your verse a lot heavier. Cause Worthless, track 5, is a really good example of where they mix things up with almost kind of Nine Inch Nails Reptile sort of beat. And really cool, like kind of almost sci-fi space sims, zap sims, and this heavy vocal against the clean vocal. And it's at a completely different pace from the tracks around it. It's very, very, very machine-like. And I would like to have seen a little bit more of that. It stands out as a track to me because it doesn't sound like that. Not many other tracks are utilising similar techniques. They're that kind of clean, very soft verse and then the huge chorus. So that to me is a slight against them. Once again, nothing that would stop me re-listening to the album, just something that I feel your album is 30 minutes, so like you have room here to be a little bit more experimental and maybe not play it as safe. And the second thing I would say is as a kind of negative overall is that I also do kind of feel at times the band are a little bit too controlled on their heaviness. Like the moments that jumped out to me were I think this will be a lot better live. I think on CD it maybe doesn't translate the same way. CD, MP3, whatever it is you listen to. But like there were certain moments where I was kind of like nodding my head through and I was like, all right, we're going into, and then it didn't do it into something a little bit heavier, which I think they could do, and I think they will do it live. I think it's just maybe the way it's presented overall. So as a first time listener to Tayne, I think for someone who has been an industrial fan for over 20 years, who's like pedigree and listening to this sort of music and gets excited when it's done well, they do so much well and very confident. Like it just sounds like a very, very confident album. I think like you shove this on pretty much any time as well, which is kind of cool about it. It's not a listen that's going to be overtly challenging to you, but if you want to pick apart the layering and all the rest and spend a bit of time with a good set of headphones on, loads of reward in there as well. Like I say, my only negatives are I think some of the verses are a little bit interchangeable, maybe lacking a bit of personality or diversity, and I think at times certain tracks want, like it's almost like they're crying out for a heavier like impact, which never quite comes. But I do have like I say, my theory is that if and when I see these guys live, those heavy sections are going to sound fucking huge. So I think it's just in the realm of the album. So yeah, like they're a really exciting band, and one that I've said before, I love this sort of music. So I'm super curious to see if and when they do come up, what that looks like. They're on a good record label, so I imagine they'll be touring. So yeah, That's
Nice.
my views. Now
Cool.
you are someone. Let me invert the question here. You're someone who typically doesn't like industrial music, although we have plenty of evidence now in our couple of years of recording this of bands that have dragged you in and won you over. But you also really like Health, and there's a lot of Health in here.
Yeah.
And I recently got you to listen to The Downward Spiral, an album which you've been shunning for years, and you turned around on that. So let me pose it to you. How did you get on with Tayne?
Yeah, I think, like, as you say, I'm kind of slowly kind of coming around to more industrial music. We reviewed the Downward Spiral as part of our classic reviews not that long ago. That was an album that initially I just didn't get. I just didn't understand that at all. It just wasn't for me. Fast forward like 25 years, and now like I have much more appreciation for it and the genre as a whole. To be honest, I'd say my tastes have vastly changed over the years, and I think us also kind of reviewing more kind of modern industrial bands like Health and the Haunted Horses recently and Author and Punisher and stuff. I think that's probably helped me find more to enjoy about the genre, and I'm enjoying this kind of like emergence of bands right now that are coming out and, you know, trying to put out their kind of take on the industrial sound. With Tayne, firstly, there's actually quite a bit of nostalgia here with Tayne soaked into their sound. There's so many like kind of facets of their sound that kind of transported me back to like 80s and 90s. Sometimes it was like a certain synth sound that they would use, or a kind of vocal melody that like just evokes like that kind of like 80s time period, kind of a la like Depeche Mode. Or sometimes like a drum pattern or a snare sound even that would be like, oh, that's a bit kind of 90s Nine Inch Nails. And that sort of stuff I think they did really well. I thought like musically the album captured those like almost kind of like more retro elements very smartly, and not in a way that felt like they were just kind of photocopying it. Because on the other side of that, on the other side of the band's sound, there's something that leads into a more kind of dystopian kind of vibe, that has that more modern slant to it, and that's more akin to like bands like Health and Author and Punisher as well.
Definitely Author and Punisher.
Vocally, like yourself, I got a lot of Health on this album, very ethereal and almost kind of like pop laden in style. There's a little bit of Zetra in here as well, but it's very haunting, very light, but it does add a nice kind of contrast to the album, on top of all the kind of more mechanical industrial sounds they've got happening. You've also got moments where the vocals do kind of go in a more aggressive direction. Tracks like the opener Erased, or track 8 Wasted, for example, I did feel that was kind of leaning more into that kind of Author and Punisher type kind of distortion in the vocal delivery. Sometimes it gets quite extreme. Like there's moments I was like, this is like a smidge away from black metal here, but I think they balance it out quite well. I never felt like it was too much at all on the album. Very much in the same way they kind of balance out the guitars on the album as well. This feels like an industrial band. Like this is not like a metal band trying their hand at industrial. Tayne used the guitars as a layer and a way to kind of add mood or kind of darkness. It's not really it's not really riff driven for the most part, but it adds a kind of heaviness to the release. I think Coherent was a really good example of that, where it's like weaving in these like almost like industrial blast beats and really kind of like savage screams, and the guitars are adding this kind of metallic kind of thickness to the whole thing. But the guitars never like overshadow the electronics or the industrial elements on the album. Very much like Author and Punisher. When we saw Author and Punisher live, it was kind of similar. You know, the guitars were just a kind of layer of the sound. They weren't really like a focal point. And there are moments on this album where the guitars do get a bit more exposure. The last part of, I think it's In This Trend, I think the track is called, had a very like kind of Rammstein kind of type feel in the kind of rhythm and the guitar style. Coherent, which I mentioned, also has like a guest vocal, Rachel from previously in Eths, but is now the vocalist in UK hardcore band Cage Fight with James from Tesseract. And I think they use the additional vocals well on the track. It's another tone, another texture in the mix. And her style is very kind of like just kind of scorched kind of sounding. So it works well against that clean melody from, I'm assuming that's Matt that does the cleans. Different to the other guest, which is later on the album, Rollo Tomasi, vocalist, keyboardist, James Spence appears on the track called Fear. It's much less abrasive, has more like vocal layers and harmonies, and is generally more kind of synth layered, but another really cool track on the album. I think if I had to mention like the track that I came back to the most, I think it would be Scars. I think for me that was just like perfect length, lots of interesting dynamics, and it just kind of encapsulated everything. It's like ethereal and dreamy, but it has moments of heaviness and build towards a kind of climax of these really like pounding industrial drums and heavy guitars. It felt like if this was like a deathcore track, that the end part would be what you would class as like the breakdown.
Yeah.
But I also dug the there's a kind of like Godflesh vibe on Wasted, which I'm a big fan of Justin Broderick, so that was another kind of highlight for me on the album. You also get these like little shorter tracks as well, almost kind of like interludes. Track 7, it's called We. It's a really good way of just kind of keeping the momentum going. It gives you that kind of feeling of cohesion in the album, but it just reduces the intensity just a little bit, so you're getting like that kind of small breather. And I imagine like live in those moments, they would be maybe playing something kind of visual in the background, possibly, you know.
Or the lights will be doing something. You know what I mean?
I get the feeling, like I watched a few of their music videos, they seem like a very visual band. I think their live shows would be really like interesting to see. Feels like a band that comes with like a full kind of live show package, I would think. Same on the production front, I really liked the kind of tone they've gone for on the album. It's not as flashy or like kind of hyper polished as like Rat Wars was by Health. It's got something a touch darker to it, but I think that helps with the harsher elements of the album. I think it helps them really kind of pierce through, and it also works with that like kind of nostalgic feel I mentioned earlier. There's lots of like 80s and 90s influences on this, so I think had they gone with something really polished, it wouldn't have really reflected those sounds in the best way. Not a huge amount of negatives from me. I felt like the kind of heavier guitars were cool. They did add like obviously like a heaviness to certain parts of the tracks, and you know, kind of built them up with a bit of impact. The guitar riffs were maybe just a little bit kind of, I don't want to say stock because that's a bit harsh, but like a bit kind of general. There was nothing really memorable about them. You know, I did the finishing, like, that was a great riff. Like, there's nothing like that.
This is why I like. This is I come back to. There is a reason that to me when we talk about industrial music, Nine Inch Nails sits above a lot of people, and it's the guitar riffs are all memorable as fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if they are just in there for layers, you know the riff part.
Yeah.
Whereas in here, kind of similar to Health actually, it's more for like a you know, like is adding in something that, to be honest, a synthesizer could probably do.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that guitar's doing it because you know you're gonna have that element live as well. But it's not as if, and there are bits in here like in Wasted. Wasted has like a kind of almost a 9-inch kind of. Like there's something. There is a bit of lead work going on there.
Yeah.
But it's not designed in a way where the singing matches up with it or is bouncing off it. The singer's still doing what he would be doing anyway, regardless of it.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly a memorable riff.
Yeah.
Even if it is doing something leady, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's a difficult one because it's, as I said, it's not really a riff-driven album.
No.
But I just wish they were a little bit more kind of memorable than they were. Other thing is like it is heavy on influences.
Yep.
And I suppose, like, going forward, I think this is their debut, so this is, like, very early on for them.
It's a debut album?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there's any other albums online. Singles and EPs, I think, but, yeah, I think...
Right on MNRK?
Yeah.
Fucking fair play, man, honestly. Well done, guys.
Like, going forward, I mean, like to hear a bit more of kind of Tayne coming through, a bit more of their personality coming through in some of the songs, because there was a lot of times where I was like, oh, that sounds like this band or that band, and that happens a lot throughout the album. Still enjoyable, I still really liked it, but I just like to hear a bit more kind of individuality coming through. But yeah, it's a really cool album. I like the contrast of styles and instrumentation. I thought they balanced it out extremely well. It does get, you know, there's moments where it gets more violent, but it never felt like exhausting to listen to. Industrial music can be quite kind of like bulldozing at times, but
Yeah.
the counterbalance of melody and the clean vocals on the album work really well to keep you kind of hooked in, and kind of stops the fatigue kicking in. So yeah, really liked what I heard, and looking forward to hearing like where they go next after this,
Mm-hmm.
especially like kicking off like an album with MNRK. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, like to see him live. Definitely like to see him
100%,
live.
yeah. Okay, so final thing, scores for Love by Tayne. What are you thinking for this one?
Yeah, like I've got a little bit more respect for them now that you've just told me it's a debut. So I'm swinging them with a 4 on this one. I think it's a really well put together album. It certainly plays a lot to my tastes, for sure. I think they're a one to watch. I think is the easiest thing I can say. I think they're only going to get bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So 4.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. 4 out of 5 from me as well. Enjoyed what I heard. Yeah, there's a lot of influences here, but I think that was quite a good thing as well, because it does kind of pull you in. You're like, oh, well, I like this band, so I'm quite enjoying what these guys are doing as well. Going forward, I'd like to hear just a little bit more of them coming through in the sound. But like to kick off with an album like this is like pretty impressive. Production sounded great as well. Really liked the sound of the album. So yeah, I'm going 4 out of 5 as well. Interested to see what happens next. And like you said, would love to see this live, to see what they do on a kind of visual front as well. So that is the new album from Tayne, out on January 31st on MNRK Heavy. Links below to the band, the pre-order, Bandcamp and all that sort of stuff. Check out, have a listen, see what you think. That is the review. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.